JD Vance, Trump's pet ape, really opened his mouth and stuck his foot deep down his gullet the other day. He says he's a much better vice president than Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris, quote, she took shots of vodka before every meeting, end quote. These miserable rat fuckers, I swear. Vance called in to a Nazi podcaster, Vince Coglianese show, specifically to berate former Vice President Kamala Harris. And JD Vance, Trump's ape, said that the main difference between him and Vice President Harris is that he doesn't drink before work. What a miserable fuck. Every one of these people, huh? This is what he said on the Shitheads podcast. He said, quote, well, I don't have, 4 shots of vodka before every meeting. That's one way I think that Kamala really tried to bring herself into the role is these word salads. And I do think that I would need the help of a lot of alcohol in there to answer a question the way that Kamala Harris answered. All right, so you see what he's doing. He is creating a little shitty comment that is typical from this fuckwad, J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United and according to the Daily Kos staff, these were some choice words from a jerkwad whose daytime food ordering skills rival a 4 a.m. college run to Dunkin' Donuts. And Kos adds, not to mention Vance's infamous word salad about childish cat ladies. And his shitty attempt, these are my words, not Daily Kos, but his shitty attempt to bully Ukrainian President Zelensky in the Oval Office. And, of course, it's well known that the toilet rat's Secretary of Defense, this miserable asshole Pete Hegseth, has a history of being, quote, very drunk at work functions, end quote, as per reports that came from several of his former Fox Sewer co-workers. Also, during the podcast with the little Nazi jerkwad, Vince Coglianese, JD also said that Vice President Harris, quote, was just less empowered to do her job. Less empowered to do her job. That's quite the statement coming from the same asshole whose campaign claimed that Joe Biden was controlled by Kamala Harris. Well, see, it doesn't matter what these jerkwads say, these Trump Nazis. The only factor that comes into play is who they're talking to and who they think is listening. And depending on the audience, they can say at one point, well, it's daytime. And then 5 minutes later, if they feel they're talking to someone else, they can say, well, it's evening. Of course, the toilet rat and the ape here built their campaign on blaming Kamala Harris for all of President Biden's so-called bad policies. And they accused her of failing in her role as the mythical border czar. Well, they have a good one now, don't they, Oh, little Corporal Holman, what a crazy bastard he is. So much of this shit happens over the weekend. For example, let me find this. Yeah, I have some bad news for Cubans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, and Venezuelans, especially that Hispanic or Latino population is heavily represented in Miami-Dade, South Florida. The last time I was in South Florida, and I don't disrespect this, I think it was kind of cool. It's almost like entering a different country, a country where French, Creole French, Spanish was as prevalent, if not more so, than English. And it was fun. It's a very colorful area of the country. By colorful, I mean it's celebratory. Sure, there's an awful lot of poor people there because these are first-generation immigrants. They've just arrived. But the bodegas and the little pop-up shops and the street traffic and the festivals, it's really a fun place to go. But not if you're the toilet rat, the white lump of garbage that is the President of the United States. Well, guess what? On Friday, the Sewer Rats Department of Homeland Security says it's going to revoke legal protections for hundreds of thousands of Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, setting all these folks up for potential deportation within a month. So to all you Latino men who probably don't hear this podcast, who live in Miami-Dade or in South Florida, who decided, well, you just couldn't vote for a woman to be president. Oh, please. Or for some other reason, you either withheld your vote or voted for this sorry toilet rat. Here comes your reward, boys. Here it comes, directed right at your solar plexus. You're going to have your ass kicked back to the very countries you left because you either did not vote for Vice President Harris or you did not vote at all as a way of showing your macho inclination. I'm not going to vote for a woman. Well, what the fuck? Not from the culture and society I'm from. We only use women for one, well, maybe two different things. This order by the sick fuck Tom Homan and the toilet rat, this order applies to about, well, according to the AP, 532,000 people from the four countries I mentioned who came to the United States since October of 2022. These folks arrived with financial sponsors. These are not people who dodged and jumped around and hid in the bushes. These are people who came with American sponsors. And they were given 2-year permits to live and work in the U.S. Now, the new Homeland Security Secretary, this crazy bitch Kristi Noem, well, she stood up on her hind legs, by God, and said these people are going to lose their legal status on April 24th, which is 30 days after publication of the notice in the Federal Register, which was today. Now, this new attempt by this little racist bitch, Kristi Noem, who is doing exactly what her Nazi dictator boss wants her to do, the new policy, according to AP, impacts people who are already in the United States and who came here under the humanitarian parole program. And this is just another example of the toilet rat deciding to end what he calls the, quote, broad abuse of the humanitarian parole. Which, by the way, humanitarian parole is a longstanding tool that presidents of both parties have used to allow people from countries where there's a war or political instability to come here and temporarily live in the United States without being considered some kind of a criminal or a crook or a immigration dodger. They're allowed to come here, bring their families, work, pay into Social Security and Medicare, pay their taxes. But not anymore, because the toilet rat has decided, oh no, these people are colored. During, if you remember, during the toilet rat's campaign this time, he promised, crossed my heart and hoped to die, that he was going to deport millions of people. And now that he is El Presidente, he has also been ending legal pathways for immigrants to come to the U.S. and to stay here. Now, if these immigrants come to the U.S., they're welcome to stay here if they're from, what did he say one time? If they're from Scandinavia? Well, if you're from Norway or Sweden, hey, toilet rat, point to a map and show us where Norway and Sweden are. I don't know. Anyway, a spokes geek for the Department of Homeland Security's Nazi Tom Homan said parolees without, this is curious, a lawful basis to stay in the U.S., quote, must depart before their parole termination date. The same spokes creep said, quote, parole is inherently temporary, and parole alone is not an underlying basis for obtaining any immigration status, end quote, which is horseshit. But it doesn't make any difference. You know, people in the Toilet Rats administration say whatever the fuck they want to say, and that becomes not just truth, but received wisdom, because it comes from, right, the toilet rat. Now, before this new order from the Department of Nazi Security, before this new order, the beneficiaries of the program, the people that were here from these countries, could stay in the U.S. Until their parole expires, although the Toilet Rats administration has stopped processing their applications for asylum, visas, and other requests that might allow them to remain longer. But please, I mean, Trump is involved in, I don't want to call it ethnic cleansing, color cleansing. There you go. If you're orange-faced asshole like him and the rest of your body is a sickly, pasty white, well, you can stay. If you are a normal European American, by that I mean, the Italian Americans are a little bit dodgy because, we're a little bit, we're not completely white. You know what I mean. French Americans from the south of France, where there's been a lot of Algerian cross-breeding, you might say, they're not exactly white either. Greek Americans, there's another, oh man. But as long as you are not colored in the sense of that the sewer rat applies, well, you're safe. But people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, you folks are considered, iffy at best. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.